Hey, this is Victor Antonio here in the Orkin Red Zone. Today I have the one, the only, you know who he is, Jordan Bosmeny. Jordan, what's happening?
Morning. How are you?
Man, I'm doing good. Yourself?
Can't complain. It's morning, so it's a start to a week, so we're good.
Dude, give us a little background. What I want to talk to you about is like what every time I look at the charts, the sales charts, you're up there, right?
Mhm.
And so questions we often get is, what is he doing, right? But before we get into your performance, what the best of the best do, kind of give us a little background, like, maybe pre-Orkin and then when you got to Orkin.
Okay, great. Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. I actually just celebrated my 14-year anniversary the other day with Orkin, so it's been a long time. But the thing about where I am or where I was prior to here is I actually used to be in celebrity management. I used to run with a couple of guys that had a TV show on MTV called Jackass.
No,
Some of you have heard of it.
no way.
So yeah, I used to manage a few of those guys. And when I say manage, I was pretty much a professional babysitter. My job was just to basically travel with them wherever they went, make sure we made our flights on time, nobody got in trouble, and we got paid by vendors.
Wait, I got to pause. I got to just pause you on this one. So how was it managing those guys from Jackass? I mean, that had to be like, another level of management.
It was, it didn't require any skill on my end. I've just known those guys pretty much for a long, long time. And they just needed someone to look out for their best interests that they trusted. So they tapped me and it was, again, it was a lot of work. You don't think it would be, but just trying to get them to show up to places on time was a challenge of itself.
I bet.
Yeah.
By the way, do you have at least one story? Come on, just one story, just one cool story.
I mean, let's just say I've met a lot of upper celebrities. I wouldn't call them necessarily A, B, or C celebrities, but I've gotten to meet a lot of other cool people just through them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, did that for a while. Then I need to get something more stable, have some stability in my life. I was trying to get married, start to raise a family, and so on and so forth. So I knew I wanted to do sales because I think I had the gift to gab and lacked the experience of sales whatsoever. So I interviewed with a whole bunch of different companies and they all kind of shut me down saying I didn't have any sales experience. So I had to start somewhere. So luckily I interviewed with Western Pest, who's one of our sister companies at the time.
Mhm.
And the funny story is I went through the interview process, sat with one of the RSMs at the time, and she told me that unfortunately she didn't feel like I had what it took to be a successful rep or to do the job. So I reached out to the HR director who was my soccer coach at the time, or used to be my soccer coach. And he's like, let me get you in front of another RSM. So he put me in front of another RSM, did really well in that interviewed with the branch manager. And then I got hired on as an account rep for Western Pest. And then started doing that and was in one territory down in like the Annapolis, Maryland area and kind of worked my way up. And now I'm in Washington, D.C. And I love what I do every day. It's a new experience, and especially just meeting new people and building these relationships is where it's at for me. And that's where I get my satisfaction from. So fast forward to today, 14 years in and still loving every day of it.
Congratulations on the 14 years. But I do want to go back to, so the first RSM that interviewed you, like, why did that person think you didn't have it? And do you reflect back on that goes, what did I lack?
I've still talked with her from time to time, and it's just more or less just kind of, sending her my sales numbers saying, hey, listen, and we kind of joke back and forth about it. But I think it was just for the sheer fact that I didn't have any experience on there. I didn't really have any kind of track record to show that I can do the sales job. I just knew that, again, I was a people person. I love talking, and it just, I don't know. I think my previous job experience maybe kind of, I guess, I don't know, to that.
You saw Jackass. You couldn't get past Jackass.
Exactly. But
by the way, given the fact that you're very successful today, I'm sure you messed with her a little bit, right? Like,
I actually just sent her a message the other day. But every time the sales numbers come out by the end of the year, I will send her a message like, "Look who's here," or so on and so forth. Yeah, just to mess around. But she's a good sport about it. She's great, and again, we've come a long way.
Right. So now you go to your second RSM and you're having that interview there. What was different? Did you take anything from the first interview into the second? What was different?
I don't think I took anything different. I think it was just maybe her managing style and what I can bring to the table. It just didn't jive with her. And then this other RSM that I met with at the time, we just clicked. But the funny thing is that RSM quit 2 days in onto my second day of starting. So my first day I started here, he took me out car shopping. So I didn't really get the full experience. So when I first started, I leaned a lot on just some of the reps to kind of help walk me through the sales process, what to learn, and a lot of just kind of role playing back and forth to, where I am today.
So let's walk through that because, one of the purposes of this podcast is to really, kind of extract from you some of the things you learned early on. We'll get later on to, how you're doing today. But I want to go back to those days. I'm actually asking you to regress back to then. And so, your RSM quits 2 days after you just started. I'm sure there was some anxiety. Like,
Absolutely.
First of all, you get shook by the first RSM rejecting you, so to speak. Now this person leaves after 2 days. Walk me through your mindset right there. Like, what were you thinking? And walk me through that.
I mean, I definitely felt defeated at that point because, again, I had interviewed with other companies prior to this and they all kind of mimicked the same thing of I lacked the sales experience. So with that first interview, again, turned down on the Western Pest side, that was really kind of the spark to my Kindle. I was definitely I set out to prove a point, to prove people wrong. And I'm very competitive in everything that I do. So I wanted to make my mark and prove a point that it was a wrong judgment call on their end. So yes, I was kind of thrown to the wolves and trial by fire just for the fact that I didn't have any senior leadership to lead on. And that's where kind of I digressed and just shifted to talking with all of the other successful reps out there. There's many that were successful at the time and a lot of just the local reps. So I kind of defaulted to them on ride-alongs, learning what to do, what not to do. And then role-playing was a huge component for me, just kind of mastering my craft, because a lot of times I could sit there and role play with different reps or different branch managers to kind of find out what I'm missing, and they could throw me different objectives my way. So that way, after repeating and repeating and repeating, I'm ready to go out in the field. So after about 3-4 months, I was fully confident to go out there. With that being said, it took me a long time to finally catch, my momentum and my rhythm. So basically at 6 months, 8 months in, maybe in about a year in, that's where I finally felt 100% comfortable in what I was doing, getting out there, handling any type of objective that was thrown my way. And then I just went out there and just hit the streets hard. I was so hungry to get out there and I was tired of seeing my name not in the top 10, top 25, and they didn't even have that out at the time, but I just knew I wanted to do great things. And I knew that it's all really about the relationships that you're building. I knew that I was great at doing that. So I just went out there and just did everything that I could to paint the streets and basically brand my own self. You're branding Jordan Bosmeny. They're buying from me, and then Orkin is just basically a benefit. That's what you get when you're buying with Jordan. So that's kind of the mentality that I went out there with.
So I love that hate fire, right? That's the drive, right? Like, I'll prove you wrong. But I want to go back because, again, I really want to help the new people who are on board because you said a lot of valuable things. 4 months maybe of training to kind of start getting some rhythm, but it took you a whole year to finally feel like I got some real rhythm. But I want to go back, like literally almost at the beginning when that person left. Like I'm a new person. I just joined Orkin, right?
Yep.
I'm scared to reach out. How did you give me the ABCs of, look, Victor, I just picked up the phone, just started. I mean, what did you do to reach out to reps so you can do some ride-alongs, do some role-playing with them? Like, what did you do?
So that's a great question. There was probably about a handful, maybe 3 or 4 people that I within the drivable area that I would reach out to and tag along with them or have them tag along with me. And basically that was me trying just to understand what to do, how to do it. And at that time we had, basically at the Western Pest time, they would give you this book and we had a time and territory management book. And I kind of read through that and how to develop your territory, but really the valuable information that I learned was just my ride along with the reps. So I would,
so I don't want to interrupt you, but I really want to get this basic point because you're stepping over because it's too easy. Like, did you just call one of the reps and say, I need help? That's what I'm looking for. Like, what was that first baby step?
First baby step. So I would go out to an appointment. I would beg them to come with me to the appointment and I would sit there and I would have them kind of sit side by side with me. They would let me run the appointment, but I would also have them interject. If there was something that I needed help on, because there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't answer or didn't know what to say or what to do next. So I would kind of tag team these appointments with them, but I would definitely reach out to them and say, listen, I need your help. And then they would come out there. Sometimes I would cue them in, maybe even split the sale with them because I'm taking time away from them from doing what their day-to-day job is. But basically reaching out to them saying, hey, I need your help. Come with me. They would come out to these appointments, help me do these inspections, and then help me work on these proposals because I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand what to do, what to put in, even how to price things out. It was such a struggle for me on how to figure out the pricing because we do have some pricing matrices that we can go by.
Mhm.
But a lot of it is basically you have to put yourself in the technician's shoes to figure out how long is it going to take a technician? And that's what I really had a hard time grasping. So that's where I would lean on them saying, walk me through how you would price this out, the why and the how of that. And then we would go through and then we would sit down with the client and go over the proposal a few days later. Because at that time, we didn't have the iPads to go over the proposal with them right then and there. So we'd come back with them, present it to them in paper, go over some type of objectives that they may throw our way. But kind of sitting down with them and just, I called them enough that I could claim them. They could claim me as a dependent on their W-2s
Okay.
for the sheer fact that I literally called them multiple times throughout the day with so many questions. And now going back on it, I feel bad, but yet as a new person, I would want someone to do the same thing with me because that's how I learned. And that's how with a lot of these new people coming in too. Yes, we have a large manpower of upper management that are here to help, but at the end of the day, we're the ones that are kind of in the thick of things going out and doing this on a day-to-day basis. So I would always open it up to other new reps to reaching out, just kind of like I did when I first started.
And what was there when you did reach out, right? Like the first couple of times you reached out, what were the typical responses from these reps?
Everybody was very, very, very helpful. I think probably 2 months in, they were probably annoyed of me by doing it. But for the most part, it was a communal effort and everybody was very, very helpful in trying to get me on board. Because at the end of the day, if we have another successful rep coming on board, that's contributing to our region numbers. So that means our regional team is happy. We're hitting our branch numbers. So everybody gets happy at the end of the day for that. So again, it's all hands on deck approach. But for the most part, the handful of people I did reach out to were extremely happy. And then I would also reach out to some of the top reps that were in the company. I knew Ben Hill at the time was huge success. And so I always strive to be like him. I know that he was kind of like the model that I looked after and said, how do I get here? And so I would talk to him and kind of see what his approach is and other people, within the company. And I think that's helped out a lot for kind of just development.
Yeah, I love that the fact that you found a model, almost like a role model, somebody to say, I want to mimic that person, what they're doing. I wanted to ask you, how did you overcome that fear of asking stupid questions, when you're first starting out? Because I want people to hear what you did.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think it was a stupid question. They may think it is, but because again, they're used to this. I was not. But again, I mean, just not being scared. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And if there's something you don't know, we're here to learn. We're here to understand. So at the end of the day, nothing's a stupid question. And I really took it upon myself to go through and really digest that whole time and territory management book to fully understand what my job is as a sales rep to get out there. Once I got out in the field, that's a whole different beast as far as trying to get in front of the client, trying to get that meeting with them, trying to even just get through the door past a gatekeeper. And then, that's a whole nother, yeah.
So talk to me about the first time you had almost like a pilot, you had to fly solo. You know what I mean? You had enough hours training. Now you got to fly solo. Is there a memory you have of the first time you're like, oh, I have to make the cold call, get past the gatekeeper, and then I have to do the presentation? Walk me through that first, one of your moments.
I was very nervous and we go through different phases. So we meet with the client. We want to schedule what we call a discovery. And discovery is where we're just basically sitting down, getting to know them, the ins and outs of their business, kind of what they're doing right now in regards to pest control. And then from my takeaways from that is when I segue to like an actual inspection, a walkthrough with them. And then we shift over to like the proposal. But my whole problem is when I was doing this discovery thing, I was asking the questions, but I wasn't listening enough. And so what would happen is I was asking the question, they were responding, but in my mind, I wasn't listening to them. I was thinking about the next question I was going to ask.
Right, right, right,
So I
right, right.
lost a
Yeah.
lot of the information that was just through conversation. So I had to kind of train myself to ask the question and just sit back, relax, enjoy this. This is not just doesn't have to be uptight. Um, and that took me a while to kind of get through, just to have just a basic conversation, start retaining the information of what they're responding to my questions. And that was my, once I finally got that down, I think it was easy peasy from there.
That it's such a good point because because the best of the best figure this out, right? You don't have to rush through it. And I like your full confession. This is part confessional here, right? Where you're like, I wasn't listening. I was hearing them, but I was simply, that phrase, I was just waiting to talk. I wasn't listening. And I think for new people, that's hard to do. They feel like they need to talk. When if you, as you say, through the discovery process, if you're asking the right questions, they'll give you all the information you need. So then you can kind of adjust course as you go along. So you said certain things that I love so far. First of all, I love the role model piece, right? Find somebody whose position you'd like to be in. Second thing you said was the no fear, whether it's asking questions or just going out there and getting in front of customer or asking reps to help. The listening part was great, but you touched slightly a couple of times already on, you read the manuals, you went through you knew your product and services. Talk to me a little bit about how important that is to really understand your material so you're not thinking about it when you're in the presentation.
So the one thing that I really kind of took to is I call it the Blue Bible, and it's our pest book. And it basically tells you everything about every pest that's out there, their habitat, what to look for, what they look like, understanding that, because that's what I really need is to really speak professionally when I'm in meeting with an account. I want to be able to point to a certain pest or a certain possible conducive condition that could possibly bring in these certain types of pests, and understanding that. So being able to speak educatedly to, what we're looking at or how do we treat a certain pest. And then from there on, it shifts to kind of the product. What products do we have to offer? There are some products that are kind of just, we're going to offer it regardless. But there are certain products that we have to their specialty to certain types of pests to eradicate them. So understanding the whole pest component, how they operate. I was so fascinated by that just because, again, it's the hierarchy of like bees and just everything in general. So I studied that book in and out to understand it. And then that way, when I went out there, I knew what I was talking about. And then I kind of defaulted to the product. And Orkin has so many different products and services that we can offer, but a lot of it is go hand in hand. When you read this book, it kind of default to that. So I think the blue, I can't remember the name of the book, but it's the pest handbook, pretty much.
The Blue Bible. We'll just call it the Blue Bible.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have any tips on, when you had to study, because you're studying two things, right? Got to know the pests, got to know the products, put those two together in front of the customer. Do you have any learning strategies that you use to help you retain the information more?
I mean, I'm a firm believer. Take tons of notes on there, take tons of pictures. Now where I am, it's kind of second nature. You go into a place, you see a bug or what to look for. You can automatically guess what the pest issue is right then and there. But then a lot of times riding along with technicians, when I first started, I spent a lot of time doing that to understand the treatment process of it. I knew what I was looking for. I knew how to identify, but I don't necessarily know how that treatment process looks like. So I know the products to use, but now I need to understand the process of how we treat it. And that's where spending a lot of time with our service team, hopping in the truck with the technician or meeting them at an account, understanding what they have to do. And that helps for two things. Number one, to explain the treatment to the client. So that way we can set the expectations. Because that's the biggest thing is if we're treating for a certain pest, I don't want my client to be calling me the next day saying we're still seeing them. And that's where setting these expectations really come into play when you're sitting down with the technician, riding with them to understand what that treatment process looks like, how long it's going to take, how long will it take for them to see results. And then that way you're setting those expectations with the clients. But then on top of that is you're riding with this technician, you're seeing what they're doing. And then also you get the other component is how much time is it going to take, which then basically tells you how to price it out.
Right. Tell me a story of something you benefited from when you were riding with a technician, a learning moment, and you can even include the technician's name if you remember it, but I guess I want to get that day in the life of, look, Victor, here was the situation. I'm riding with the tech. Here's what I learned that day.
Back then, we would, one of the, I guess, things that we had to do starting off was go through like a night service. And a night service, what we typically do is like an after hours. We have this, it's a machine called an Actisol machine, and it's for heavily infested places that have saline roaches. So they would have us go in. We have to wear full respirators to fully understand it. But you think a tech goes in and out and they're, in and out real quick on a job, and you don't understand the time that really kind of entails to set up the equipment. There's a lot longer process than I would have assumed, without having to see it, go in place firsthand. So really kind of understanding the time. You think that it would take an hour of service? Yes, but there's an hour of setup, an hour of tear down afterwards. So, and what you think an hour of service may end up being 3 or 4 hours. That kind of really opened my eyes as far as not selling a lot of stuff based on price, because again, it's not going to be a benefit to our technician. You're going to have pissed off technicians and pissed off service managers and so on and so forth. So really kind of understanding that. So I went on this job with the tech. It was like 1:00 in the morning. I was expecting to be out of there in 45 minutes, but probably 4 hours into it, I was like, when are we going home? But there was just a lot of work that was involved. And that was just an eye opener for me. That is just, there's a lot more to just walking around, understanding the time of it.
I love what you're emphasizing here because, by the way, I can relate to you because as a salesperson, I used to travel with product managers who actually developed the product. And so I got to really ask them a lot of questions about the product so I can be smarter when I present it. I also like the fact that you're talking about price versus value here, because too often, we confuse the two. And I love the fact that you said, I thought it was going to be 45 minutes, it turned out to be 4 hours.
Right.
And that's real value. Speak a little bit about these new salespeople or even existing salespeople who are always like, well, we're more expensive, but they don't understand. We're not positioning price, we're positioning value. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And that's, I'm a firm believer that I think the biggest, objective is ourselves, because I'll walk into a place and you automatically think that assumption that we're already going to be too much for that place. And I still am so surprised every single day when I present actually a proposal in front of somebody, you go in with the mindset, they're not going to buy it. So why are we even proposing if you don't think we're going to buy it? So I had to kind of get rid of that mentality. But again, it's who thinks what's too expensive? We may think it's too expensive, but the client may look at it and be like, wow, this is great. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more at stake to the client in regards to this small pennies on cost wise. I mean, you got to figure that the cost of losing a customer comes in and sees, a bug, they're going to let everybody know about that. And how much business is that to that client that people are never going to come back there, let alone that client or that person that came and ate at their restaurants, never coming back. And nowadays with the power of social media, you're reaching tens of thousands of people from one person's bad experience. I mean, I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. First thing I look at is the reviews. If there's a negative review or if there's anything less than a 4-star, chances are I'm probably bypassing that product. And that's the type of stuff that can make or break a client. So sometimes when you get that objective, you're way too your price is way too high, you're going to have to break it down for them and then bring the value of it. And there's a lot more to it and kind of open their eyes to the bigger picture of not necessarily there's that cost, which is on our proposal, but the cost of losing somebody as a customer walking through the door is a lot greater than the cost of our price.
I agree. By the way, you keep saying objective. I think you mean objections.
Objection.
But I'm with you.
Objection, yes.
That whole part about how did you get over that thing you mentioned that's so important, that how you say no to yourself before the customer says no because you think it's too expensive, they're not going to buy it. How did you get over that? And you gave me part of the answer is that you understand the real value of what you're bringing to it. But maybe walk me through it. How did you mentally get over that hump?
You walk in there mentally saying, yes, they're going to say no to this, but you're still presenting the proposal one way or the other. And just what kind of changed my mindset is eventually people looking at me and be like, yeah, let's move forward on this. And I was like, well, maybe I'm my biggest competitor. Why am I selling against myself on this and explaining why they're not going to buy and just let them tell me why. And so if I get that objection from them saying, we're too high, then my next question is, well, what's too high? What do you think is too high on it? I want to understand where they think we are too high. But again, I started surprising myself like walking out there, like, I cannot believe they signed. And then that just changed my mindset. I'm like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? Why am I even going on
Yeah.
there with this negative thoughts that they're not
Yeah.
going to sign? And just, do your thing.
But that's so important, right? Because sometimes you have to fight through your own belief system, as you say, because you're your biggest competitor sometimes. And then it isn't until somebody buys, you're like, what? They actually
Yeah,
bought? And then you repeat those a couple of more times and you realize that they're seeing something you don't.
exactly.
You're focused on price. They're focused on the value of everything you've mentioned before this. What is the cost of, let's say, some type of, whatever infestation happening and you're losing customers and it appears on social media?
Yep.
So you're focused, not you, but I'm just saying in general, people focus through the price lens, customers looking at the value lens.
Mhm.
And so, you've been very successful. I keep seeing your name. It's always up there. And I really harass you online, by the way, when we're doing the shows. I'm always talking about Jordan BossMoney,
Yep.
right? So I hope you don't mind me busting your chops.
Not at all.
That's with love. My boss used to say, if I'm harassing you, it's because I like you. If I don't harass you, you should be worried.
That's right.
And so, let's look at your client base today and how you've maintained this incredible momentum. Like I said, your name is always in the top 3, I think that's safe to say, which is just incredible numbers you're posting. Talk to me a little bit about your business today and how you've managed to ramp it up. So business, ramp up, but also your ability to sustain this level of production is incredible.
As you build your tenure here, the one great thing is we should all be focused on building these relationships. And that's where it basically comes down to, as I said before, you're kind of branding yourself and you eventually get to a point where you've met with enough businesses within your territory. And that's what you really have to do. First off is kind of just hit those streets hard, paint the town with your business card. I used to take my business cards and take double-sided tape and put it over someone's door lock. If like their restaurant was closed at the time, put it over something that I knew they had to physically remove to open up their door. I did
Love it.
that.
That's brilliant, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a cheap door knocker, but it's brilliant.
exactly. And then utilizing social media, or even, restaurants are getting deliveries in the morning time. So walking through their back door, and I always tell people who ride with me, the one thing that surprises me so much is you can walk into the back door of a restaurant, snoop around. Nobody ever stops you. And I always joke that you could literally walk out of there with like a case of beer if you wanted to, and no one's going to say to you otherwise. But utilize that to your advantage, walk around. And then when someone asks you, say, hey, I'm looking for the general manager, but utilizing that time to find out who they're using as their competitors, kind of get a little insight before you actually get approached by someone there. And then, have that conversation with them. But I'm at the point now where I don't say that I worked less hard, but a lot of the stuff that I did initially, as far as for building my name, I have a lot of clients that now reach out to me. So you're basically working smarter, not harder. So a lot of these people that we meet with, general managers of restaurants, general managers of hotels, apartment complexes, they leave and move on to different properties. And if they have such a great experience with you, and maybe you don't get their business the first time around or the second time around, but still being in contact with them, building that relationship, at the end of the day, they're going to think of you and they're going to be the first person that they call. So there's a lot of times where I don't have to do anything, where the person's calling my phone saying, hey, Jordan, I'm at this new restaurant, or I'm at this new property, or I'm at this new hotel. And it's a less of a sales process. I don't have to go through the whining and dining of it. They know in their mind that they want to do business with me and do business with Orkin.
Yeah.
So again, that takes a lot off my plate. That's all the icing on the cake. And I still, especially with DC, there's cranes and so much construction everywhere. So I get excited when I see that, because that's all new business that I think that potentially could be coming my way. So focusing on that type of stuff, all that other stuff where your phone's ringing, those people are going to call you regardless. So that's less time where you have to spend. Yes, you want to pop in and say hi from time to time, or let alone accounts you've recently sold, pop in there, see how things are going, even pop into the business left and right of them and ask them for referrals. Do you know anybody else that could benefit from our services? And just, you'd be surprised on the feedback that you get, especially if you have such a great relationship with them. And I think that's where really the value is. And what's helped a lot for my success is just building that relationship with all of these clients. Shoot them a text, ask them how their family is. It's not always business. We're also just looking out for their best interests. Stop at their property. And if there's something, going on that doesn't seem right to you, or even as seasons change, like mosquito season, when that comes around, at the beginning of the year, start reaching out to them in December, because they're probably still feeling all basically the wrath of the previous year's mosquito issues. And then basically that kind of says to them, hey, we had such a bad year with mosquitoes last year. We really need to ramp up our program and maybe incorporate this. So when you start talking about that in December and January, and then come April, they start to have these issues, it just validates everything that you said to them from the previous months. And then just, it's basically free business that falls into your lap.
Dang it. That segment you just did was just like a master class. There's just so much stuff in there. I love, by the way, inside I'm laughing because you said, you get in there early at the restaurant and you walk in,
Oh, yeah.
nobody's there. You remind me of that video, these two guys who said you can get into any concert if you just carry a ladder in.
Yep.
Because nobody questions people with a ladder.
That's
So
true.
It just reminded me like you could just walk in with an Orkin helmet. Nobody's going to ask any questions.
Exactly.
Can I ask about by the way, thank you for the emphasis on two things. One, relationships, right? And also the stacking of those relationships over the years. Because it just doesn't happen like it spikes one day, you're successful. Those relationships, those great ones, have been stacking over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the third point you made, which is as these people move around, they come back to you because it's more about the relationship. There is no sales process, as you pointed out. It's about the relationship.
Right.
And that requires a level of patience that I think a lot of people maybe don't think about. That Jordan didn't get there overnight. It wasn't he flicked a switch. It was binary. It went from 0 to 1. It's that you've been building over time. So I appreciate what you said about that. As you're looking at your business, if I was to build a business right now, I'm going into commercial, I'm building a business. You've mentioned several, verticals. You talked about restaurants, you talked about hotels, probably business parks. Talk to me a little bit about how you began building your verticals.
What I initially did is I went out and just hit the streets. And what I did is I did a thing called a blockbuster. And that was something that I made up myself. And I would really kind of focus on my territory because, again, my territory was relatively large. And we have two other reps that are in DC as well. So it's kind of, we have what we call an open territory. So the goal is basically get in the door for a lot of these, for the other two reps. And then we have also protected areas like when a lead comes in. But my goal is to basically centralize rather than just bouncing everywhere, very unorganized throughout the DC. I would spend a day trying to focus on a single vertical, whether it be apartments or restaurants. And then other days I would just focus on a block or two blocks of an area. My goal was to hit every door. I don't care what type of business it was. It could have been, a H&R block, and it could have been a restaurant, an apartment. My goal was to basically hit every single one of them just so that way I can drive through my territory knowing I've stopped in every single one of these places and leave my card.
In other words, you're marking your territory is what you're telling me.
That's 100%. That was, my territory was my mailbox. Yes.
Right. Right.
So I would get out there and just paint the streets and then do follow-ups. Because again, if I'm putting in this work, I need to follow up on people that I prospected on there. So I would shoot them an email or at least try to get some type of contact and then maybe go back to them and see if they got my card that I stuck on their door, or see if we can maybe do business and, see where their head's at.
Okay. So, like I said, I love this. It's a vertical strategy and a blockbuster strategy. I love those two things already. Let's go through the vertical strategy first. So let's say you're focused on apartment complex.
Yep.
Did you have a certain cadence? Like, look, Victor, so every day I would make 2 calls to, what did you do?
So I would focus on property management companies. So in DC, we have like Bozzuto is a large property management company, Graystar, and we have a lot of national partnerships with certain property management companies like Berkshire. So I would touch all the Berkshire ones within the DC area that we don't service, and also the ones that we do service to kind of introduce myself. But I would focus on the brand of them. So if I was focusing on Bozzuto, I would try to touch all the Bozzuto properties because we do.
So, by the way, Jordan, I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
But be clear in what you say, touch them. Give me the tactical stuff that you do.
Perfect. Okay. So what I would do is like for Bozzuto, before I go in the door and introduce myself, I would go on their website because I can go on their website, click on their property. And then luckily with them, they list who their property manager is and who the service manager is along with their emails. So sometimes I would shoot them an email. Sometimes I would shoot them the email after I popped in there, but at least I have a name to go by when I'm walking in there and introducing myself. So I'd go in there, ask for so-and-so. If they weren't available, I'll leave my card. But while I'm there, I'm kind of snooping around. I'm opening up bait boxes if there are ones already there to see who they're currently using, because that's going to tell me, what I'm up against competitor-wise. And I understood all my competitors' pricing. So I kind of got an idea of what we were up against cost wise, service wise, and so on. So I try to find the property manager and then the service manager. The service managers, I came to realize, are the ones who we really need to spend the time with because they are such an integral part of what I call the buying matrix. And they are basically a key player in deciding if we come in. Really, the GM of the property is the final say, but they're really going to co-sign to whatever the service manager, because anything that the pest control does is really going to impact the job of the service manager who oversees that property. So that's who I was really kind of looking out for when I would stop at these properties, is to give them my card, shake their hand, find out who they're using, see when they're bidding out their pest control, because usually August, September is bid season for apartments, but that's not always the case. So finding out when they are looking and if they're happy with their service. And if they aren't happy with them, I would still try to push and say, hey, listen, can we at least give you a second opinion? Because they may not know what's going on that they think is going on.
I love that, by the way. I love the, can we at least give you a second opinion?
Yeah.
Like when they say, I'm happy with our current supplier, there's nothing wrong with having a second look at this.
Exactly.
Speak to this. I think I know the answer, but I want you to kind of give it to me. Is that when you start focusing in on a vertical, Jordan, you also it's almost like this cumulative effect begins to happen. You learn something from the first time you talk to one property manager, then you go to the next one, you learn a little more. And all of a sudden you start building this knowledge base where you understand the nuances of being a property manager, like, for example, who to talk to. Talk to me about that when you focus in on something, you begin to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
You just know the domain.
Each hierarchy within the property, they all have different focuses. Again, the property manager, they're focused on obviously the pricing. They're focused on basically their occupancy. They're focused on any type of social media. Whereas like the service manager of the property may not care about that. All they care about is how's it going to affect their job. Is it going to require more of their time, because they're already spread thin as it is at a lot of these properties, kind of going through fixing stuff and so on and so forth. So they want to basically partner with a vendor that is going to require less work on their behalf and someone that they can rely on. Where again, the property manager, their main focus is basically the overall property as a whole, how it looks, their social media, the occupancy. So those are all major things. But if they have a low occupancy and it's an established building, it could be because of their social media gatherings, pest issues, or just the way stuff's ran. So each one of those key players has separate focus of the why on their property. So you're trying to figure out which one's the most important to go after. And that's where I found like the service managers are really good person to go after. And they are the ones that move around a lot for other properties. So again,
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Talk to me now about, we talked verticals on that one, property managers. And then you said you do this thing called the blockbuster, right? You really start, give me some tactical stuff that you do that. You talked about putting a card, on a place that, they have to kind of address, like the keyhole.
Yep.
But, once you have, give me some examples of interactions that you've had that maybe people can learn something from.
Yeah. So gatekeepers, again, me personally, I don't wear anything logoed in there, because that's basically, it's a call sign. They already know why I'm in there. So if I'm wearing something Orkin branded, they know why I'm there. So I kind of like to leave that as questionable as why I'm there. Sometimes they think I'm the health department because I'm carrying a flashlight. So I like to leave it into their mind of why I'm there, and then kind of let them guess. And then,
I don't know why I find that funny. Like, what is he? So it's like, don't tell them.
Well, a lot of times you're walking in with like, I have a badge and I have a flashlight. So their mindset in DC health department. So the funny thing is I usually get the decision maker in front of me pretty quickly. But it helps out with gatekeepers and trying to figure out, I love the strategy, the song and dance of trying to get around a gatekeeper. So you walk in, you ask for a certain person, the GM, they're going to ask you why you're there. And then you get some type of, objection thrown your way to get past it. So you just kind of, all right.
What's your response before you get in for this? So you come in and I go, what do you want? What's your typical?
There are some times where I'll go in and be like, if I'm making a phone call, say I'm calling somebody to try to get an appointment, I do this thing, I call it a little white lie, but I have access to the DC health inspection report. So when I'm calling a restaurant, I typically have their health inspection in front of me. So I kind of know who they're using, who the key players are, or who their ownership is. And I'll tell them I'm calling regarding the health department. In their mind, I'm calling from the health department. And so basically the funny thing is I get a decision maker pretty quickly in front of me. And then I'll segue, say, hey, my name is Jordan. I'm with the Orkin. I have access to your health inspection reports. I understand you're using XYZ pest control. I would love to talk to you and give you a second opinion in regards to that and kind of see where they go from there. Sometimes you may get someone like, well, you're going to get some type of objection thrown your way. But again, that's the fun part, is trying to always figure out a way and then learning from that. So if I get a no from a gatekeeper, my goal is to find out, how do I get around this person? So whether it be calling rather than stopping in, or now that I have a name to go by, it's, if you ask a cook's, they are always going to tell you whatever you want to hear. So how's you guys having pest issues? Oh yes, we have all these issues. They're going to tell you everything that you want to hear. So it just kind of redoing the initial cold call when going through. So now I got to get around this gatekeeper. So how am I going to do that? So going through the back doors, talk to different people, so on and so forth.
If you're starting out and you're trying to build, let's say verticals in this case, or even your blockbusters, I want you to, again, regress a little bit, go back to when you first started out. Because again, I really want people who are just starting out to kind of really benefit from the day to day. Where do I start focusing in? Like, what would you recommend to me? Let's say you hired me, right? You hired Victor Antonio and you said, okay, Victor, here's what I need you to do over the next 90 days. And if you do this over the next 90 days, give me the full scope here, you have a good chance, high probability of being very successful. What would that 90-day look like if you were the Lord of Orkin?
Okay. All right. So what I would do is I would, first of all, have them go through, drive their territory, figure out what's in their territory. So really kind of understanding what we always say is get lost in your territory.
Okay.
Walk the streets, drive around. I developed a target list. I had a target list for different verticals. And then that was a list of basically, it doesn't matter dollar value. It was just who was in my territory that my goal was to get in the door with them and get some type of exposure out to them. And then once I developed that target list, then I would actually develop a day to say, these are the properties or restaurants, or this is who my goal was to walk in the door, introduce myself, get a name.
So Jordan, before you go into, because this is so good. So on the targeted verticals, like what did you, give me some of your parameters that you looked at to say, you know what, this is what I was looking for, Victor.
Just like restaurants would be one target list. So those would be certain times that I'd focus on, because you don't want to go into a restaurant at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It's going to make their management team upset. So if I would set time parameters, I would focus on this vertical from like 8 to like say 10:30. And my goal is to get into a set list of restaurants. So that way I know that I went in there, I would put it in an Excel spreadsheet and basically say who I went in there, who I met with, and just kind of utilize that as kind of a tally mark to see, all right, I did this, but also I needed to do some type of follow-up or put some type of notes in and what my next steps were to get in the door. If I didn't get in front of the person that I wanted to, or if I didn't get an appointment, what was my next strategy to get to that appointment? So I go in, try to at least get a name, try to get a number or an email of who I can reach out to if I can't meet with them in person, and then reach out to them that way. But my end game was try to at least get a face-to-face meeting with them, get invited to dance, to inspect their place, and then eventually give them a second opinion.
So, by the way, I love this because you said from 8 to 10:30, I can hit restaurants because I know they're not going to be mad at me, right? And so I love that. That's very tactical. And so what would be another vertical that you said, Victor, I would take the restaurant vertical, hit those from 8 to 10:30. And then in the afternoon, maybe I can hit this vertical like property management. I'm just don't, like,
absolutely.
What would you do?
Apartment complexes, any type of hospitality, because again, hospitality is great. People are checking out at 11 o'clock. So that's a great time to shift from restaurants over to hospitality. So again, that takes a lot of them off their plate because a lot of their guests have already checked out. So meeting with different, hotels, different apartment complexes, even just regular businesses, retail is a big component because they're trying to, they open up at 10 o'clock. So it's a great shift from going from restaurants to these different verticals.
I love that. So if I was going, and we're walking through a playbook here, right? And so let's say I focused on restaurants, and then let's say I did hospitality in the afternoon, just to make something up. How many would you have in your rotation in terms of number of restaurants? Let's say, and again, I don't know how you do this. Like, for example, Victor, I will only have 20 restaurants I'd focus in on, and I'd focus on these 20 for the first, 30 days. how big was your portfolio for these two verticals, restaurant and hospitality?
It was large. I mean, because again, it all depends on your market that you're working in. DC is very, very large. So there's a ton of
Right.
restaurants. There's everything that's going on. So it's a constant working book that you're adding and taking away from. So a lot of people you'll say, I'm not ready now, or we just signed on. So
Mhm.
I know to kind of shift them to the bottom of the list, but put a little note in there saying I need to touch base with this client maybe 90 days, especially with restaurants. Even a restaurant tells you no right now, they're the ones that will change on a dime. So all they have to do is one bad experience or one call to their pest control company and not get the response they need. And they're ready to move. Whereas like apartment complexes and hotels and other businesses, it takes maybe a little bit longer time, I guess, to
Right.
close that. So, but my restaurants were always kind of in my shuffle every single day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because it would be because it's almost like, it's really interesting what you're saying. I think it's fascinating because you're saying it's almost like a blend of short sales cycle versus long sales
Mhm.
cycle, and try to find that mix,
Absolutely.
and just put those together. And so talk to me a little bit also about how, because you mentioned something important. They're not ready, enter the stuff into the CRM and do a follow-up call. Talk to me about your routine to make sure that it's always handled.
So yeah, end goal is to go in, get a name, get an email, and just reach out to them saying, thank you for your time. And then set that next expectation. Be like, do you mind if I touch base with you, say a month from now, and just kind of get their buy-in to say, yeah, that is absolutely okay. And then put that on my calendar to follow up with them. Because again, things can change over time. I'm big on social media. So I will go on Yelp reviews. I will go on different social media websites just to see. People are very quick to respond on how their service was, whether it be good or bad. So I'll kind of utilize that to see if there's any changes that may have happened without actually reaching out to the clients. And then also I focus on a lot of just restaurant groups. So if I found a restaurant that I wanted to go after, I would see if that's individually, if that's their own restaurant, or if they're a part of a larger restaurant group. And then my focus would be go from that individual restaurant to reaching out to the restaurant group as a whole, typically like the director of operations, because at the end of the day, I want the bigger piece of the pie, not just that one little slice. So I will reach out to them because most of the time they're utilizing one pest control company across the board. So if I can find out if that's the case, I want to shift my focus because actually this restaurant's not going to be the one I need to focus on. It's going to be the director of ops or the ownership group of this restaurant's chain, and see how I can get in the door as a whole for all of their locations. And maybe it might be piecemealed, but that's really kind of where I shift my focus on. Maybe I need to focus on this person rather than just individual restaurant.
Yeah, I love that whole foot in the door, just try to get in.
Yep.
What have you noticed about, we're going to begin wrapping up here, but what have you begun to notice about competition? Like, what can you tell us about, look, I go there, Victor, the company or whatever, the hospitality industry, they already have somebody. Like, what are some of your strategies to try to kind of move in there a little bit and start getting them to consider Orkin?
Yeah. So I have a really funny story to kind of tag with that.
Mm.
So we have a lot of competitors. We have a lot of big national brand competitors that I compete with, and doing this for 14 years, I get to know how they operate. I get to know a lot of their reps too. So you see them from like bid walkthroughs, you see them from all different avenues on their day to day, but knowing how they operate, knowing the costs that people don't know about. So with us, obviously we have such a strong guarantee where a lot of our competitors, they don't. And when I say they don't, there's so many costs that are kind of unexpected and people have a hard time budgeting for. So if they have to call outside of a normal service day, there's those extra costs. Whereas like Orkin, a lot of it is covered under our triple guarantee. But the funny thing is I go around, I'll check these bait boxes of some of our competitors and I get to understand, one of them is Kenmore Pest. That's one of our competitors. And I would check their bait boxes and it's the same across the board. None of their bait boxes are ever serviced. So there was a large property management group I was trying to go after, and they were very, very loyal to Kenmore Pest. So I'd go out there, check the bait boxes, and then I sent them the pictures of them and say, hey, listen, I don't know if you guys are really getting the value that you think you're getting. Love to talk with you further about this. And I sent them the pictures. And then lo and behold, like they were frustrated with that. So I actually got one of their 15 properties based off of that. However, with that being said, they reached out to Kenmore and said, why aren't you guys servicing our bait boxes? And then I got a letter or an email from Kenmore Pest saying I shouldn't be checking their bait boxes, which is completely okay for us to do because that's what we do. I mean, we're hunters out there.
Right.
So fast forward to about 6 weeks ago, they made headline news. This competitor basically legally or misusing pesticides, and they got slapped with a $150,000 fine. So I took my phone, took a picture of that main headline news, sent it to the ownership group of this large property management.
It's like guerrilla warfare,
It
man.
is. But the funny thing is it validated everything I said to them 6 months ago, that you're not getting the value. And the next thing you know, I'm getting 15 other properties. And it just, those small little seeds that you're planting throughout the areas and knowing your competitors, y'all walk into account, if they're using them, I already know what's to expect. Like I already know what's going to happen when I'm going to open up this bait box. But understanding that and understanding how they operate, and just there's other competitors where they have great service, but if they have an issue, calling into their call center is such a long process that it's just takes so much time away from our clients. And that's another, sales focus to kind of utilize against, selling against our competitor.
Yeah. I love that. By the way, thank you for that story. That's a great tactical story. I love those. I want to start wrapping up here with maybe one or two questions here.
Sure.
It might put you on the spot a little bit. Why do you think, a lot of people who start with Orkin, just not a lot, I should say a lot, but there are people who just quit.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see? When you see people who quit, what do you think you see? And then what would be your advice to those who are kind of like maybe, struggling to kind of, get to that level where they go, yeah, this is worth saying.
Right. So, I mean, that's so true. And I think a lot of it is, I don't necessarily think it's the training component of it, but I think that sometimes they see, they'll ride along with me, or they'll ride along with other people that, have been here, have some tenure. And that's what it really comes down to, is the tenure component of it. We spent the time and did a lot of the stuff that they're not necessarily seeing right off the bat. And they don't fully understand that you have to really grind it out. And yes, it's not going to be like a light switch, like you said, where they're going to boom and be automatically successful. It takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of hustle, a lot of grinding. And that's where over time, it eventually just kind of starts to pay off. And that's where people really kind of need to sit on and wait. Because again, things don't happen overnight. We're farmers when it comes down to it. We're planting these seeds, and some of these seeds will grow right away. Some of them will grow down the years. I'm closing deals now that I've worked on for years. So that's trying to wrap the concept of the long-term and the short-term component of it. And I think that some people start to then feel like, well, maybe I wasn't cut out for sales. But it's at the end of the day, you got to get out there. You got to be hungry, and the motivation component. That's what it was for me. And that's where, getting turned down so many times for the sales, I was not going to let myself fail. So that's where I was just so hungry on this. And that's where a lot of like these other reps, what they need to do is they just putting in the legwork. You have to get out there, get a routine together. I'm a big component. I wake up at 4 a.m. I have such a structured routine. And then when I get out in the field, there are days when I have nothing, but it's what I do with those nothing days that kind of turn into something great. But again, putting all that legwork in, staying organized, using, different CRM features, utilizing all the tools that we have, ride-alongs, understanding just everything as a whole, and even role playing. We've gotten, I think, really far away from sitting down with a client and going old school, sitting down, going over the proposal. But role playing is such a huge component to my success, because again, it helped me really master my craft to eventually delivering the end product, which is our service.
Yeah. So one last question, but I'm going to ask you for a favor also, because you inserted this, and I think it's so important. You said you had a routine. I'm not going to ask you that because I really want you to get into it. Is there any way, Jordan, you'd be willing to kind of either, send us a 1 or 2 minute video of what that routine is? And then we'll send it to Ed, and then we can just share it with everybody. So he goes, here's my routine. Yep. I want to end with this question, because I think it's an important one. It's a very purposeful / aspirational question. Is like, what has being with Orkin done for you? And I'm talking about, from a financial standpoint, from a career standpoint, from a people standpoint. Give me what this company has meant to you, has done for you, your family. Just kind of walk me through what it's done for you.
It's changed my life. And I'm completely serious when I said it. Like my first big sale, which was a place called Franklin Park. That's when I got my taste of there was blood in the water, meaning that I just got super hungry and wow, I can make a really great career and a great living here. And based off of that sale, it was like a $250,000 sale. I was able to pay for my wedding, put a down payment on a house, raise a family. But the thing I love about what we do and what I do and just the success of it is you're walking in to meet with all these other people that are doctors or lawyers or whatever. But knowing that I make as much as these guys, like that's such an awesome feeling walking in there, just knowing that, yes, I may be selling pest control and it's not a glamorous job, but there's so much money to be made in this industry because pests are never going to go away. We've already proven the point that this job can survive a pandemic. We did great business still, even when everything was shut down. So that was another thing for me, just like, wow, this is such a great industry to be in. And I'm so dedicated and loyal to this. And again, just the fact that, commissions where it's at, I would much rather take a higher commission with a lower base than anything. And it's fuel to my fire. So the more that I get out there, I'm the one that drives my commission check, So if I'm not making enough, I look at myself, not look at everything else as a whole. What do I need to do differently? And it's basically, it's all numbers. So the more I propose, the more exposure that I have out there, the better chances I'm going to have to close one or two, even more of those. So at the end of the day, we drive it.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's important. Jordan, any last words before we get out of here?
Again, as a new person, don't feel bad. Don't feel like you're annoying us by calling us. Again, we are here to help as a whole, whether it be myself or any other reps. Again, it's communally as a group, if our branch is successful, our region successful, the company, it benefits everybody. Our stocks go up. It provides basically job longevity for us. So just don't be afraid to reach out if you have a question. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Again, we're all here to learn. And that's ultimately what we want to do, is we all want to get on this level.
I love it. Learn, help, make money. I love that triad personally. Anyway, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. And for you listening or watching, thank you for your time and joining us here on The Red Zone.